Stacy, we got a big one today. It is a big one. It doesn't get much bigger than this. It might not get any bigger than this ever again.
Yes.
We have the man that created eXp, our founder, our leader, the man who sits atop of the eXp mountain, Mr. Glenn Sanford.
Yes, we do. And I'm so looking forward to it.
And let it be known that anyone that ever questions the culture of eXp, I would challenge you. Send a text or an email to the guy at the head of your company when you have a small podcast like ours and ask them if they'll appear on your podcast.
Yes.
See what kind of response you get back. Because Glenn Sanford is here. So without further ado, Mr. Glenn Sanford.
Let's do this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Glenn Sanford, how are you doing today, sir?
Good, Ryan. How about yourself?
Amazing. And first of all, thank you so much for joining us. This is amazing to have you on here. As you both know, Stacy and I are eXp agents, and it's very special that you could join us today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I have a bunch of questions for you because I have, done my homework, obviously. The one thing I want to ask you that maybe that you don't get into very much and is talking about your history, kind of like your earlier life. Not necessarily the things that led you to create eXp, but what did life look like as a young man? Whereabouts was it? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was actually born in Peace River, Alberta, so north of Edmonton, so Canadian by birth, and we actually it was early in life. We homesteaded up in northern Alberta, and we had a single wide manufactured home, and it had I think if you lived there 5 years, then you got the land. So that was my early on upbringing there. We moved when I was 5 years old to the lower mainland of British Columbia, Abbotsford, and toward closer to Vancouver, and then when I was like 14, 15, moved stateside, and when I was about 18, 19, moved literally less than a mile from the Canadian border, but on the U.S. side. So during my 20s and 30s, worked downtown Vancouver, various different activities, and but been in sales and marketing from a fairly early age, from my paper route in BC to starting a software company at 15 years old to selling Kirby vacuum cleaners at, I think I was 17, 18, Yellow Page advertising, timeshare, stockbroker, a lot of stuff around sales, and then got more into technology, even though I'd had a computer at a young age, got into sort of where technology and sales marketing combined in the early mid 90s. And so yeah, I've done a lot of different stuff, but in 2002 I was 35 years old. I was kind of broke, and but I was an internet guy, and a realtor decided that I needed to get my real estate license. So noticed probably that I didn't say I decided to get my real estate license. He decided I was going to get my real estate license. And so I got my real estate license, and I've been in this industry ever since.
Wow. Go ahead, Ryan.
Sorry, I was just wanting to explore that a little bit. So when you were previous to your real estate career, what did you think life was going to look like?
Well, I was I've always been an entrepreneur. I've started, I don't know how many companies. I think the last count was like around 17 companies. Some of them got some traction. Most of them died a ugly death, as many entrepreneurs can sort of reflect on that and recognize that in their own past experiences. But I always enjoyed being an entrepreneur. I'd rather be a broke entrepreneur than personally than a more traditional job. For me, entrepreneurship and trying new things out and seeing what worked, for me is kind of like, that's what I've always been passionate about. So being an entrepreneur and building businesses has been kind of the thing that got me going. Every once in a while, I considered the alternative of, oh, man, I've got the skill set. I could probably get a well-paying job, but it's like, do I really want a job? And I'm like, no, I want to be an entrepreneur. So, when I got into real estate, I was hosting some local Chamber of Commerce websites. I was an internet developer. And how I ended up getting sort of drafted into real estate was I would sold an ad to the top realtor in a particular market that I was in, and then he had me start to work on his website. I started to generate internet leads. He was 62 or 63, and I was 35, and he didn't want to learn how to work internet leads, so he decided that in addition to generating the leads, I needed to work the leads. That's how I ended up sort of getting into it. In fact, it was kind of a weird deal because kind of a unique situation in that, I just studied for my real estate license exam. And I know in Canada, there's a lot more work to becoming a realtor than it
Yes.
is in the US. But in the US, it's, you study for 60 hours, which you can do sort of home study. Then you prep for an exam, and then you take the exam. And I was doing web design work as well. And about a month after I had technically agreed to become a realtor, Hugh said, Glenn, why don't you have a real estate license yet? Because you can literally do it in a month. And I said, well, Hugh, I get paid $60 an hour to do website development work, and I need to pay the bills. And he said, well, I'll pay you $60 an hour to study for the license. Go get your darn license. And so that's
Nice.
what ultimately pushed me over
Into real estate.
to getting the license.
Nice. So what did your first few years in real estate look like then? Everyone has a different story of their entrance into real estate.
Yeah. Well, first, the nice thing is I'd actually created a whole bunch of business constraints for me to be in the business to begin with. Because keep in mind, I was more this internet marketing guy, inbound marketing. You could sort of think about it from that perspective. And so I'd done the traditional sales stuff. I mentioned the Kirby vacuum cleaners. I've been a stockbroker. I'd done, called 100 people a day to get 10 people to potentially be interested in an investment, and then out of that I might open up 1 or 2 accounts. So that was kind of the outbound, smiling and dialing kind of activities. And I'd had this experience in 1992, 93, where I was actually a contract employee of America Online. I was big on the online services. I was a well-followed person because of my stock picks, where people actually wanted to open accounts with me, and it was because of posting of the stocks and investments that I liked, and I had a really good track record. I was one of the better researchers on stocks, which I've always been good at. I just get bored after about 3 months of doing that I kind of need some other activity. So it ended up not ultimately being my profession. But what I learned is that the internet, and at the time was AOL, it was pre-web, was a great way to generate inbound leads. And so when I got my real estate license, I didn't want to do the open houses or wear the realtor pin at the grocery store, or talk to my friends and family about buying and selling real estate. I wanted to work on this internet thing. And so that's what I did. And so I got licensed April 29th, 2002. And between that and the end of the year, I sold 17 properties just to people that I met online.
Wow.
And so I became the rookie of the year. My first full year, I was the number 3 agent in the office. And there were 2 people that outsold me. One was the guy who brought me in, and he by himself, without an assistant, sold 93 properties that prior year. and then another guy who was big on commercial and owned a lot of properties around town. So those are the top two agents in the office. And then there was me. I was the top buyer's agent, number 3 in the office, my first full year. So it was I had hit a lot of the sort of the accolades of real estate because I was generating all these leads. People would come to me and say, "Hey, can you help me do this in my market?" So Seattle, I was doing it for a guy down there, and then I was doing lead gen for a lot of different agents. And then we were talking about how do we build a real estate team, and then I went to Keller, and then joined in April, I think April of 2004, and was the number 1 team in the office that first year that we were there. And then by 2006, I was in the top 50 nationally with Keller, and it was 100% internet inbound lead gen follow up. That being the whole business model. And so that was kind of my early career. I was on track to do $100 million in production in 2008, which at that time, 100 million was a very large amount of production for a real estate team. Now it's a decent amount, but back then it was huge. And then the 2008 hit, and then obviously that's when the world imploded, and that's actually why we created eXp, was sort of out of that downturn, taking a whole bunch of stuff that we learned in the 7 years prior.
So would that be the catalyst then, the market crash? And instead of doing what a lot of people did, which was get out of real estate, you pivot and you create this new company?
Yeah, it was. Right now we're kind of going through some similar aspects, not near as brutal as 2008, 2009, but we're certainly seeing, because of higher interest rates, significantly lower real estate transaction volumes, et cetera. But in October of 2008, Lehman Brothers, went out of business. There was all the bank bailouts and all the other stuff just to keep the economy afloat in the U.S., and that, of course, had ripple effects around the world. But we ended up having to close 3 of our physical offices because I ran a team-based brokerage at that point in time. And in 2009, I basically said, how do I build a profitable, sustainable real estate brokerage in a housing market that sucks? That was my technical term for what was going on with the market. And one of the things I loved about Keller Williams was what they had put in place, their profit share program. Now, I loved it in past tense because on paper it made a ton of sense. It was like, hey, if you bring somebody into Keller and they generate a profit for the office, they're going to share a percentage of that profit with the agents and brokers who help them grow. The problem is that in a bricks and mortar based real estate operation, the bricks and mortar weigh down the profitability significantly. And so the single biggest cost to run a real estate brokerage is the bricks and mortar, followed on by the staffing costs. And every office has the same, essentially 5 people. You got a receptionist or a director of first impressions. You've got a accounting person. You've got a sales manager. You've got a managing broker. And if you have a physical office, you probably still have a copier that somebody needs to come in and fix occasionally. And so this is kind of the same, people in every office, whether it be a Remax, a Keller, a Royal LePage, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. You've got kind of the same group of folks. And if you move everything onto the cloud, there's a whole bunch of that's very redundant, office to office. So you can reduce some of the staffing expenses. And if you can get rid of the bricks and mortar. So we said, hey, I can't afford offices. So how do we build a brokerage model that's not dependent on bricks and mortar? And then we were in a really unique spot in 2009 when that high-speed internet was now pretty ubiquitous. Most homes had cable internet or some version of high-speed internet. In 2002, when I got my license, almost nobody had high-speed internet in their homes. You had to go to someplace that had brought in a T1 or something high-speed, so you could search or upload photos to the MLS or do various different real estate agent activities. But by 2009, you didn't really need to do that anymore. and that was just going to get faster. So it only made sense to start to think about what would a future real estate brokerage actually look like. And so that was kind of the original sort of thinking. And then it was, okay, what would it need to look like for me if I put my agent hat on, not my broker owner hat on, but if I put my agent hat on, what would all the ingredients need to be for me to want to hang my license there? And went back to really the reason why I hung my license at Keller Williams was because of their profit share model. If that profit share model hadn't existed, that I wouldn't have went there. And so I said, this is going to appeal, like if you create some sort of revenue sharing model with agents, that's going to appeal to a set of agents that are looking for something more than just selling real estate. And then the other piece was I always wanted to be an equity shareholder in the brokerages I was a part of. I was a rookie of the year. I was the number 3 agent in the first office I was at, and I went in and asked the owners, a couple of guys, Gordy and Bill, that were 50% owners of the office. And I said, I'd like to be an owner in the office. And said, well, we're not providing any ownership. And had they done that, I likely would have stayed there for much longer, and might have even had a vested interest in actually seeing that office grow and thrive, as opposed to evaluating my options, which led me to Keller. I went into the Keller office and asked for ownership. I was 30% of the sales volume of the office, and they didn't want to sell any of their interest. And there was one person who owned part of the region, had 1% interest, and offered to sell me that. And I'm like, 1%. And then I read the franchise document that I'd have to actually sign. And it basically said that they created a whole bunch of handcuffs. I'm like, okay, for 1%, it's not even worth me considering becoming an owner for such a small percentage, given the amount of impact. And so I didn't get that ownership. But for me, that was another big piece of the model, was how do we actually make agents equity shareholders? So we, of course, created three very unique pieces that nobody else had ever done in real estate. One, and combined, I think there were some companies that had tried virtual, but they had went with 100% or a very low cost model for agents to be there. And in theory, that actually makes sense. But I theorized that there wasn't enough money for leadership in that model, meaning you couldn't hire enough on a salary basis or an hourly basis to go and actually grow the brokerage from an internal management perspective with a 100% model. So it needed to be something larger than that. And then the other piece was, I loved recruiting for Keller Williams as an individual agent. And I said, we need to take the team leader, sales manager, broker owner role, which is the recruiting role of the brokerage. We need to put that in the hands of the agents, who are really the most enthusiastic part of the model to actually grow the brokerage. And so we created the revenue sharing model of eXp with that. We started with 25 agents. Most of them didn't really take advantage of it, but we grew it over time, and eventually we kind of hit critical mass, and then this thing really took off, because there's a lot of agents that fundamentally don't have a way to get off the real estate sales hamster wheel, and they're stuck, and they're kind of miserable, and they're kind of like, hey, I go through the motions of going and meeting with another seller and taking another listing, or working with another buyer and putting another buyer in my car and negotiating the inspection and going through the financing and all the other stuff, and the emotional roller coaster. And I get a nice paycheck at the end of the day, but it's fundamentally draining to me as a person to think that this is what my life's going to be like for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And so, just trying to figure out, what would be the model that would give a future off-ramp to an agent that actually wants to think about a business that they own. In reality, a true business worth owning. KW talks about businesses worth owning, but their model didn't really solve for the real piece, which is it's still fundamentally a business that owns you. In 98% of real estate models that are out there for agents, your real estate business owns you, because if you're not out there selling, you're not out there, hustling to build your team and doing all that stuff, you're out of business. And with eXp, you can actually, build some additional streams of income, and it can actually scale over time. So it's a totally different paradigm.
The interesting piece for me on that story is you look back at the big moments in business, like Blockbuster having an opportunity to purchase Netflix before it became the juggernaut that it is. There was a small brokerage at some point in the past that could have offered you an ownership stake and basically shut down what is now the juggernaut in real estate business, which is eXp. To think that someone's choice back then could have greatly impacted what we're all doing today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is kind of crazy to sort of think about what my personal trajectory would have been then. And obviously there's going to always be innovation in the marketplace, and eventually there would have been some version of this model that would have emerged, because you basically sort of see what all the different pieces are, and somebody would have created something. It wouldn't have been eXp. eXp just happened to build the best model that had existed in the history of real estate. Now there's 22 different copycat brokerages out there that are copying some version of eXp. What's funny is almost none of them actually have somebody that has started the company that actually sold real estate. Like, they actually don't know why our model actually works from an agent's perspective. They just know it's worked for eXp. So what they do is just copy it and say, "Oh, we're the next eXp. Why don't you come join us?" And then it's just an interesting sort of thing to see, that there's a whole bunch of copycats, but very few actually understand why our model actually was created to begin with.
That's interesting, because we come across this occasionally here. And if you were to put your agent hat back on for a second, and you were meeting with an agent who's heard the model, they've watched maybe a video or two, but they're still unsure, what would you say to that agent to kind of show them what eXp can offer them?
Well, there's two parts to it. One, there's obviously it's the model just makes sense. I mean, so the model itself makes sense. But if I'm sitting down with somebody, what I want more than anything is to let them know that I personally care about their success in the business. For me, it's not about recruiting to eXp, even though obviously there's a growth component that is natural in all businesses. All businesses need to grow to survive. You're either growing or you're dying. And there's really no middle ground. If you're sort of stagnant and you're not continually innovating, you'll eventually get overtaken by the next shiny object. And so the idea is there's always an internal growth component. But for me, I think about it from the perspective of, if I'm sitting down with you and I'm talking to you about eXp, I'm talking about it as a business partner with a platform that creates opportunities for both of us. And with the idea that I'm now partnered in your business in helping you grow. And it's not just about the revenue share and equity of eXp. It's about, how do I help you achieve the goals, dreams, ambitions, desires that you have in life and in business, and how can this model, and how can I be supportive of that in either putting you in the right rooms, brainstorming on things that we can do together, figuring out where can I lend a hand. I've always referred to myself as the highest paid assistant in real estate, and the idea that I'm continually working to some extent on the front lines with agents on some of the very basics of real estate, throughout the day with different people, and having conversations and seeing what I can add value. And so I think about it as, one, the eXp model, it's proven, it makes sense. Lots of agents are joining. I mean, you look at the various different people that are joining. Just had the #1 Remax team in British Columbia just joined last week. And we've got a ton of, great agents and brokers coming in all over the world. But the modeling is one component. The other component is just, what can I do to support you in helping you do the things that you want to do in the industry and in life.
That's great. I love that, because constantly Ryan and I are trying to find people that we want to work with and that we can grow together and help each other. And that's awesome.
Yes. So I'm going to switch gears on you just a little bit, because this is a major thing that's we've seen a lot, obviously, in the past few years. But what role do you feel that social media is playing in today's real estate game?
So one of the things that I think about is for every agent, there's a different sales and marketing plan that's right for you. However, anytime there's a new technology, especially one that is marketing oriented, that has a lot of eyeballs, the people that are there that can create content. Content is king. It's all about aggregating eyeballs and attention. And if you can do that with a large enough number of people that are interested in the subject that you're talking about, you'll never have to make a cold call again. So I mentioned I worked for AOL back in the early 90s. And I was actually their financial bulletin board and chat room host because of sort of my background around investments. And they searched me out and actually asked me if I would come work for AOL. And I said, wow, great opportunity. It was a contract employee gig. It really didn't pay much, but it was kind of cool to be able to do that. But what I learned about that is that if you've got a way to articulate a thought, idea, and opinion that resonates with a percentage of the population, good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, we saw it in the U.S., all the political stuff during, last few, couple elections. There's an audience for every opinion. And if you can clearly articulate that, so, it could be for, real estate in your local market. It could be around interest rates, it could be around community service, it could be around whatever. And you can build a personal brand around that, and you can start to share content, and people start to share that content with other people. It's a really powerful way to actually build a brand. And so it's not about doing one thing once. It's about creating, repetition over time so that people start to recognize you for your niche in the marketplace. And social media is a phenomenal way to do that, because there are, no matter who you are, no matter what you look like, no matter what your background is, no matter what, there is a percentage. It's a larger percentage than we actually even imagine in our own mind. There's a larger percentage of people who are looking for what you are sharing than you even know is looking. And so the job is to get that info out there in the marketplace so that your tribe can find you, as opposed to you having to go find your tribe.
Wow.
Excellent. Well, I need to ask you for what are the future plans for eXp? Anything earth-shattering? And on top of that, there's a follow-up question to it. Where do you see eXp in 10 years?
Yeah. So, well, 10 years. It's crazy. You think about that's 2033, and there is so much stuff going on right now. Like the stuff going on right now in AI is just off the chain.
Yes.
And I mention that because I'm not even sure that I can even predict with any amount of accuracy, what it's going to look like 10 years from now. Because I'm just seeing all the stuff coming at us right now. I think the agent today has to be super vigilant around making sure they're aware of new tools, technologies, systems, and processes that exist. Because by 2030, it'll be those agents who have fully embraced AI and those agents who are out of business. And it's going to be pretty much a sort of a black and white kind of deal. And the reason being is the consumer. Now, there will be these small groups of agents and small groups of consumers that aren't really AI oriented, but it's going to basically be entirely part of our ecosystem. We're already using Siri and Alexa and Google to talk and ask questions and do this and that. And Chat GPT, of course, has got all the press and all the rage, and GPT-4. But you go to GPT-5 and GPT-6, and they're already sort of theoretically looking, well, they already know what this stuff does. But as you start to think about how this all interconnects everything that we do, you're literally going to be having conversations with your AI, summarizing the conversations that you need to have with your consumers based on what it's seeing in the marketplace. And your consumers, AI, will be talking to our AI as opposed to talking to us to help them identify which agents will be the best suited to serve their needs. So this is just going to be there's just going to be a lot of really unique things that are going to take place. I think that we're going to be focused on continuing being the most agent-centric real estate brokerage on the planet, recognizing that doesn't mean we're going to ignore the AI evolution, and it's probably more like a it's much more earth-shattering than just calling it a revolution. It's like a full-on takeover, and so recognizing that that's sort of in the backdrop that we need to be on the forefront of, because that will ultimately sort of lock us into where we need to go. So there's a lot of stuff coming down. Like we've got, we're going to unveil some stuff in May. So we're really only talking about a month and a half away.
Nice.
We've got some cool stuff that we're doing with exprealty.com, exprealty.ca. We've got a cool way for lead gen that nobody's ever done before. We're getting some patents on it for an agent to be able to do some really neat stuff. So those are some thoughts, but I think it's going to be harder and harder to predict the future, just because the stuff that's coming at us is so, I would say in 2 to 3 years, top agents won't be using a CRM anymore. Now you'll be going, what? You're probably going, what the heck? Literally your AI is going to keep track of everything, and the AI will be the CRM, and the AI will basically do most of the communication and collaboration stuff that you traditionally have done in the past. And all those drip campaigns and sending out listings and advising and all that stuff you still do, but you'll do it because the AI reminded you, hey, here's the 5 phone calls you need to make today, and here's the script, or here's the bullet points that you need to share specifically with these people based on where they're at. And it's going to know our clients in some respects better than we do, but we're going to be the ones sort of delivering the information.
Right.
That's going to be interesting to see.
All right, Stacey, you got anything else before we get into the fun ones?
Nope, let's do it.
All right, Mr. Sanford, here we go. Favorite movie?
Oh, favorite movie? Rudy.
Really? Okay.
Rudy. Yeah, if you haven't watched, I mean, it's like I've watched that movie a ton of times. I also watched the movie Miracle, which is the U.S. Olympic hockey team. Love that movie. So I'm really big into sort of underdogs winning, and especially true stories of underdogs doing whatever it takes to ultimately overcome and to win. And so sports is a great analogy for that.
Nice. What is your favorite thing to do when you're not working?
Boating. Yeah. So boating is we live right in Pacific Northwest, just south of, well, actually east of the Gulf Islands, because Vancouver Island comes down here, and then there's a bunch of islands there. So do a lot of boating in the U.S. and Canada in the summer.
Nice.
What book has had the most influence on you?
There's so many. Well, the one I've been reading right now is a book, Winning on Purpose by Fred Reichheld. So I've got the entire management team. So I've got multiple copies sitting here on my desk because I'm giving them out to everybody. But 7 Habits of Highly Effective People would be one. Think and Grow Rich would be another. I mean, there's some classics for sure. And then it really just depends on what the focus is. If it's about business, those would be, and personal stuff. I'm also into health and running and other things. So there's some different books I enjoy reading in that genre as well. But
Nice. What is the single best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Well, I read it and listened to it multiple times in the 80s, and it was the Zig Ziglar quote: "You can have anything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want." So that's probably the thing I always go back to, is that mantra. So that's kind of my continued mantra.
Nice.
Well, sir, you are the living embodiment of the culture of eXp Realty, and we appreciate you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Stacy. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, and we'll see you very soon at one of the events.